On May 25, 2026, Nebraska observes Memorial Day, honoring over 5,000 Nebraskans who perished in military service. Their courage remains a cornerstone of the Heartland spirit. These young men and women, rooted across towns like Lincoln, Scottsbluff, Omaha, and North Platte, dreamed of shaping Nebraska's future but died in wars from World War I to the 2026 Iran conflict. They were betrayed by the state's corrupt and neglectful leaders. While these brave warriors fought to defend America, Nebraska's governors, congressional delegates, and legislators failed to protect them, supporting or enabling involvement in conflicts driven by deceit, profit, and catastrophic military plans. Nebraska's fallen were sacrificed with little or no benefit to the state or nation. World War I, an avoidable conflict, claimed over 700 Nebraskans for banker profits and imperial rivalries. World War II, a necessary response to Pearl Harbor, still cost 3,600 lives due to inept leadership and flawed strategy. The Korean and Vietnam Wars, sparked by suspicious pretexts, took nearly 630 Nebraskans in feudal stalemates. The Gulf Wars and post-9/11 conflicts took 62 lives for corporate and geopolitical gain. The 2026 Iran War added more names to the rolls under similarly reckless leadership. Governors like Keith Neville, Dwight Griswold, and Jim Pillen, alongside congressional allies, sent these youths to die under poorly coordinated strategies and negligent planning, neglecting Nebraska's own security. The economic toll devastated Nebraska's heartland. Family farms faced inflation as war spending drained resources, while businesses in towns like Omaha struggled under national debt. Communities where young Nebraskans were taken, some never to return, saw labor shortages cripple agriculture and economic vitality. Socially, towns grappled with veterans' trauma and division, worsened by leaders who failed to address crises like border security and immigration, leaving Nebraska vulnerable. This Memorial Day, we honor Nebraska's fallen by confronting this treachery. While they defended America, Nebraska's leaders did not defend them, prioritizing personal finances and globalist agendas over state interests. Voters and parents must demand accountability and end this cycle of betrayal. This report is the updated version for 2026 from the 2025 version, Nebraska's Leadership Betrayal. Sacrificing Heartland sons and daughters in corrupt global wars, a report detailing this failure and its toll on Nebraska's communities. As we place flags on graves, we remember our warriors' sacrifice and resolve to protect Nebraska's future, ensuring their courage inspires a state free from corrupt leadership's betrayal. A tapestry of treachery woven through Nebraska's history. Since its admission to the Union in 1867, Nebraska has stood as a beacon of heartland resilience. Its young men and women embody courage, patriotism, and commitment to their communities. Yet its governors, congressional delegates, state legislators, and mayors have woven a tragic tapestry of betrayal, sending these sons and daughters to perish in foreign wars driven by corrupt financial motives, geopolitical power plays, and suspicious pretexts. From World War I to the 2026 Iran conflict, Nebraska's leadership failed to shield its youth from federal entanglements orchestrated by America's inept, duplicitous leadership, including Nebraska's own congressional delegates. These wars, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf Wars, post-9/11 conflicts, and now the 2026 Iran War, were sparked by deceit, escalated for profit or regime change ambitions, and mismanaged by disastrous military plans. They cost Nebraska over 5,000 lives and left the state and nation vulnerable to foreign threats and domestic crises. Each conflict should have taught leaders to reject these futile endeavors and prioritize a secure Nebraska and America over globalist agendas. Instead, governors from Keith Neville to Jim Pillen, alongside senators, representatives, and legislatures, perpetuated a cycle of sacrifice. This betrayal extends beyond the battlefield. Leaders ignored economic strain on family farms and businesses, towns where young people were taken, some never to return, and failed to protect communities from the disruption of foreign wars and unchecked domestic vulnerabilities. The pattern reveals leadership steeped in complicity, eroding the state's and nation's strength and sovereignty. World War I and World War II, Nebraskans betrayed by flawed leadership. World War I, 1917 to 1918, under Governor Keith Neville, saw Nebraska send 28,000 young men to a European slaughter driven by imperial rivalries and banker profits, a conflict that could have been avoided and had no benefit to Nebraska or America. Senators George Norris and Gilbert Hitchcock, Representatives Charles Sloan, Charles Rivas, Albert Jeffress, Robert Evans, William Andrews, and Moses Kincaid, and the Nebraska legislature, 1917 to 1918 sessions, supported the effort. Inept trench warfare plans led to over 700 Nebraskan deaths. Neville and his allies sent Nebraska's youth to die under catastrophic military plans that wasted lives for no state benefit. World War II, 1941 to 1945, under Governors Dwight Griswold and Robert Cochran, responded to Pearl Harbor but suffered from deplorable leadership. Over 100,000 Nebraskans served. The state lost 3,600. Senators Hugh Butler and Kenneth Wherry, Representatives Carl Curtis and others, and the legislature, 1941 to 1945, backed flawed two-front strategies and negligent plans that cost lives unnecessarily. Despite the necessity of defeating Japan, catastrophic leadership sacrificed Nebraskans for broader globalist agendas. These wars established Nebraska's leaders as complicit in federal treachery. Avoidable or mismanaged conflicts taught no lessons. Governors, delegates, and legislators deepened involvement while ignoring debt, deaths, and economic strain. Korean and Vietnam Wars. Senseless Asian carnage. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, under Governor Val Peterson, sent over 10,000 Nebraskans into a proxy conflict with suspicious intelligence failures, resulting in 246 deaths. Senators Hugh Butler and Kenneth Wherry, Representatives Howard Buffett and others, and the legislature, 1949 to 1953, endorsed it. Reckless plans provoked massive losses with no gain for Nebraska. The Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, under Governors Frank Morrison, Norbert Tiemann, and James Exon, saw 15,000 Nebraskans fight and 396 killed in a conflict rooted in the fabricated Gulf of Tonkin incident. Senators Roman Ruska and Carl Curtis, various representatives, and the legislature, 1961 to 1975, supported escalation. Disastrous search and destroy missions and policy failures reflected incompetent leadership. These Asian wars deepened the betrayal, with leaders failing to protect Nebraska's youth. Gulf Wars, post-9/11 conflicts, and the 2026 Iran War, Middle Eastern deceptions. The First Gulf War, 1990 to 1991, under Governor Ben Nelson, and post-9/11 conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq under Governors Mike Johans, Dave Heineman, and Pete Ricketts cost over 60 Nebraskan lives with little no advantage for Nebraska. Flawed intelligence, unintelligent invasions, and botched withdrawals exemplified reckless leadership. Senators and representatives including Chuck Hagel, Ben Nelson, Deb Fischer, Doug Baruter, Adrian Smith, and others, along with the legislature, supported these engagements. The 2026 Iran War, beginning February 28, 2026, under Governor Jim Pillen and current congressional delegation, Senators Deb Fischer and Pete Ricketts, Representatives Mike Flood, Don Bacon, and Adrian Smith, followed familiar patterns. Pretext-driven strikes, regime change ambitions, and catastrophic military planning with missile exchanges, disrupted shipping, and high costs. Nebraska troops were once again deployed into a conflict offering no benefit to the Heartland while domestic borders remained unsecured. These Middle Eastern wars underscored Nebraska's leadership treachery, perpetuating sacrifice for external interests. Current leadership, abandonment amid invasion and new conflicts. Governors Pete Ricketts and Jim Pillen, Senators Deb Fischer and Pete Ricketts, Representatives Mike Flood, Don Bacon, and Adrian Smith, and the Nebraska legislature, 2023 to 2026 sessions, have prioritized foreign engagements, including the 2026 Iran War, while neglecting border security and state sovereignty. The Nebraska National Guard remains stretched, compliance with federal policies continues, and domestic threats grow. Past disasters should have taught rejection of entanglements. Instead, they perpetuate betrayal. This era reflects the culmination of Nebraska's leadership failures. A century of corrupt wars and catastrophic plans shows governors, delegates, and legislators prioritizing their own finances and globalist agendas over Nebraska's security. Conclusion: a final indictment of Nebraska's leaders and complicit citizens. Nebraska's history reveals a tragic, unbroken tapestry of betrayal by its governors, congressional delegates, and compliant state legislatures. From Keith Neville to Jim Pillen, and from George Norris to the current delegation, these leaders repeatedly sent over 150,000 Nebraskans into foreign conflicts under deplorable military leadership that reflected America's reckless and duplicitous approach. From the deceitful pretexts of World War I through the fabricated incidents of Vietnam, the intelligence failures of the post-9/11 wars, And now the 2026 Iran war, they have cost the state over 5,000 precious lives, saddled generations with crushing debt, and left both Nebraska and the nation dangerously vulnerable to external threats and internal division. This updated 2026 edition of the report, Nebraska's Leadership Betrayal, Sacrificing Heartland's Sons and Daughters in Corrupt Global Wars, lays bare more than a century of systemic failure. It documents how Nebraska's own elected officials consistently prioritized globalist agendas, corporate interests, and political expediency over the safety, prosperity, and sovereignty of the very people they were sworn to protect. The ultimate fault does not rest solely with the politicians. It lies heavily with Nebraska's citizens and voters who, through complacency, apathy, or misplaced trust, have allowed this deadly cycle to repeat for generations. Parents have watched their children march off to wars that offered no benefit to the Heartland, while communities buried their fallen and bore the economic and emotional scars in silence. The time for passive remembrance is over. Nebraskans, voters, parents, farmers, and families must rise with righteous resolve. We must demand leaders who place Nebraska's security and America's interests first. We must reject endless globalist wars, secure our borders, and restore state sovereignty. The courage and sacrifice of our fallen deserves far more than flags and speeches. It demands a legacy of genuine change. Nebraska's future depends on this awakening. The Heartland's sons and daughters did not die so that corrupt leadership could continue trading their lives for power and profit. The fallen are watching. The time to break the cycle of betrayal is now.